black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and this is a part two of a two-part series that we had the Umoja Circle always try to bring innovative discussions, and sometimes discussions that a lot of the media type of outlets shy away from. But this is what we here at the Umoja Circle turn our faces towards, because memory always precedes action, we believe. In other words, history. You know, in order to deal with a problem, and I've said this on a number of shows prior to this, that you must understand the history that brought that problem about in order to deal with that problem. What was the cause? What was the genesis of that problem? It started somewhere. And the problem that we are dealing with in America, which is the original sin, has always been about race. Race is an artificial construct, okay? And America has a mythology that denies that. And until, just like when you go to a psychologist and you want to deal with how that person view themselves, how that person act, you always find that when I talk to or see psychiatrists or psychologists do their lectures, they always say that most of psychology and the issues that are produced by psychological traumas is that it's always a secret. That's why they come into being. That's why you go there, so you could hash out the past and what's kept secret that's producing these sorts of behaviors. That's why I say memory always precedes actions. And this part two of the discussion that I started last show, but let me stop there and introduce myself. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found, and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. Most of the stuff, since history is not pushed in this country, and one of the greatest type of philosophies, if you ever want to understand the ancient Egyptians who were black, who looked like me, there are statues that look like me, right there in the Cairo Museum of ancient mummies and ancient statues of ancient pharaohs. They always say in all their temple is, first you must know thyself. If you don't know thyself, you can't make plans of how you will march into the future. Again, memories precedes action, okay? You can't act without memory. I can't get up here and go to my car without memories of where my car was parked. If that memory is gone, I won't be able to function and move by going to my car. If I don't have a clue, a memory of how the information I'm working on disappears about where I live, I would have even if I find my car, how can I get to that car? My actions will be totally different than somebody who has memory. And last show, I tried to emphasize this about the civil rights movement. This is 2022, and the Civil Rights Act, which was a seminal act that is constantly being brought up by people other than people of African descent, and even some African Americans who don't know their history. It's to me right now, it's coming across if it was the cure-all. That we had this thing called enslavement for a couple of 100 years, then another 100 years of Jim Crow, apartheid, segregation. And then we had these civil rights icons and these groups like SNCC and groups like that, and then President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, and then there was the Voting Rights Act in '65, and then the Fair Housing Act in 1968, and then everything was good because the paper said it was. But we got 58 years. This is 2022, 1964, 58 years to look back and see, really? Have things changed? Or does black people still have to deal with voting issues? Do black people still have to deal with the criminal justice system? Are black men and young women still being gunned down and executed by the police? Many of the riots that started in the 1960s, that were established in the 1940s and the 1930s or the 1919s was because of the interaction with the state or those who wore the badges. Going back, you see, people of African descent has always had an issue with the criminal justice system. How so? It sounds bad when I say it, but if you put it in the context and the vision of history, you understand when you're in a slave state, an authoritarian state, and you try to escape a slave camp, no different than the slave camps that were done to the Jews in Germany during World War II. You know, and you escape those things for freedom, but the laws of the land said that because of the color of your skin, compared to the color of the dominant group skin, you are a criminal because you want to do the same thing that every other human being around you that is white was doing. Going where you want to go, being free to express yourself, that was against the law. So our relationship with the laws of America has always been contentious, and we got to understand that. But who tells the story? That's my point. Who tells the story about the civil rights movement? Right now, we have politicians that I know doesn't have the best interests, if they're Republicans, in today's America, 2022, for black people. Every February, and when they need black votes, we'll talk about Martin Luther King and the great things he did, or they will talk about the speech, "I Have a Dream." You hear it from all kinds of white people, people who are pro-black and who are allied, people who would vote against anything that has to do with black people, but when they're put in front of a camera, will try to act like there was something that was done in the 1960s in that past, in a mythological past that is more and more, to me, becoming. Before I go further, I want to talk about this concept about images, because that's my concern. And this is what I started with in the last show, and I think in this show, for those who might be coming upon this discussion just now, I would like to go back to what to emphasize what I'm talking about. This is a quote from a book called 1984, written by George Orwell, back in it was published in 1949. So the people he's talking about, that future generation, and I'll read it in a minute, is us in 2022. and I quote, "Whoever controls the image and information of the past determines what and how future generations will think. Whoever controls the information and images of the present will determine how those same people will view their past. He who controls the past commands the future. He who commands the future conquers the past. And who controls and conquered this future by pushing these new kind of, who has taken over the narrative of the civil rights movement? Is it black people? I'm hearing white Republican conservatives using, the "I Have a Dream" speech. I'm hearing white conservatives talking about Rosa Parks and the great things she did by dealing with the bus boycott in 1955. But I want to show you an image of a people who control their narrative. Okay, this is a image, a 30-meter tall, almost 100 feet tall, just recently unveiled in the African country of Benin. And if you don't know what Benin is, it's close to going towards the south in the middle to the south, close to going in the direction of South Africa and those Lesotho and all those countries down there. But this statue represents a group of women that you might be familiar with. They were called by the French colonials who had to fight them in the later part of the 1800s, 1890s, when they tried to take over the countries and colonize them that the Europeans were doing, which was, colonization was no different than Jim Crow segregation. It just raped the country of its resources and didn't help anything for the people. But this statue represents what they call the Dahomey Amazons. These are black women regiments that fought alongside male regiments, and they also had the honor of guarding the king. They were vicious, according to French records, fighters. And they were around from 1600 to around the turn of the 20th century, around the time of the First World War. But they were dominant, and the people of Dahomey, the government, the black government, who controlled the images and information of their history, honor these women. Look how big a statue they put up there. The next statue is another thing. This is in the country of Dakar in Africa, right to this day. Look how huge that honored the black family. Where's our statues of the black family? We have these arguments about black men and black women. I hear even amongst ourselves, if you read tweets from our younger generations who don't know their history, don't know what's happened in the past, think it's something that's natural in black men and black women that make them angry at each other. No, when you're under a stressful situation, not even a stressful, traumatic situation for hundreds of years, you're gonna have certain types of behavioral patterns that you need to get rid of, but you got to understand that history. This is how they represent the black family, okay? This is how they represent the black man and woman. Even they're saying that they understand that they represent us in America too, or throughout the diaspora, because that's facing the direction of the ocean in which a lot of their people were taken. This is in Dakar, Senegal. Let me show you an image that represents some of our icons. Look at this. Do you see something powerful like that first image of a black woman? This is a warrior by all rights. She didn't fight no regiment, but she fought a system that was just as dangerous as any battle. This is the image of Rosa Parks. I think it came out in 2014. They put it in, this is in the statuary hall of the Capitol building. Okay, the same Capitol building that was attacked on January 6th. This is a white version. This is what I'm talking about. Whoever controlled the images. Look how demure she is, non-threatening. This sister was a fighter. In her autobiography, from the time she was 6 years old, she was told, she would say that she would sit on the porch with her grandfather, who would carry a shotgun, and she would ask him, "Are you going to shoot any Ku Kluxers tonight, Grandpa?" Okay? Do you see that in this image? This is a woman in the 1940s who went and investigated for the Mississippi, for the Alabama or the Montgomery NAACP lynchings. She went to the sites. She went through the back roads where these horrific events happened and reported. Do you see that in this image? Do you see the power in her? Okay, you don't even know she's on. It's supposed to be represent her sitting on a bus seat with a pocketbook. Come on. She was an organizer. She organized the black youth of the youth division of the NAACP. This is what I'm saying. Who controls the images of us? How is the civil rights movement benefiting us today when we got other groups still pushing out these images that take away from what that system was all about? The next image is y'all should be familiar with this, is Martin Luther King. But like I said in the last show, this man was arrested 32 times. Do you know that in the newspaper he was called a thug? Okay, same thing that Tupac was called in the 90s. That's what was called. Only 25% of Americans thought he was doing good. And most of them, all of them were black, or some of them were some few whites. But majority of them, majority of the people thought that he was just rocking the boat. Even in some of the upper rich blacks thought him as a troublemaker. Okay, 32 times in jail, brutalized, and he was assassinated by the United States government, according to other people. All right, he was harassed under a program that was found in 1970s in Utopia, Philadelphia, which brought to light the program by the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, who harassed this man, who told him to go commit suicide, who said to his best friend, Harry Belafonte, who told us later, he just a year before he died in 1966, he died in 1967, he told him, before he died in 1968, was assassinated. He said in 1960, said to Harry Belafonte, I think I brought my people into a burning house. And he also said in the sermon that he was supposed to have spoken on the next day, that Sunday. He died the next sermon that he was going to do, in which he said that America is going to hell. Do you see all that? You see that kind of fighter? Do you see that revolutionary? You could tell by looking at those two African images that there was some kind of power there. Look at that. This sister is ready to fight for what she believes in. Look what we got. This family's ready, that brother's ready to fight for his family. The black man is there. The black man is part of the black community, whether you like it or not, but there's an image of him that's going around. People who look like me, black males, that we no good, shiftless. This is the same crap that we had to deal with for hundreds of years to justify slavery, to justify Jim Crow. Who controls the images and information of the past will determine how future generations think. How are we thinking as black people when it comes to the civil rights movement? People don't realize that the civil rights movement was an economic movement. We talk about for example, we talk about the March on Washington. And what everybody from a sixth grader, first grader, is always going to say these 54 lines of black man and black, I have a dream and all that. That was not even part of the speech. In fact, the title of the March on Washington was the March on Washington for Jobs and Justice. We don't talk about that. The speech that Martin Luther King started before he got to that point with the I have a dream, okay, which is the second half of the speech, and it was an ad lib that he just came to him at that moment, and we'll talk about how he came to him, was about that in 1963, in August of 1963, when that speech was at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial, was to commemorate the 100 years prior. Because in 1863, that's when the Emancipation Proclamation was. And he was trying to say, just like I'm doing, going back the last 58 years, he's going back the last 100 years, and he said that check that you wrote telling us that we were free with the 13th Amendment, that we had civil rights by the 14th Amendment, that we had voting rights by the 15th Amendment, all in the later part of the 1860s, the early part of the 1870s, and then you remove the troops and let those same Confederates take power, and we caught hell for another 100 years until 1963, that check bounced. That's what the message in that speech. And how many people talk about that? All we talk about little black boys and little black white girls holding hands on some mountaintop. Who changed the narrative? That's my point. Why are we distracted from what was that movement about? It was about economics. You had things like Operation Breadbasket. In other words, if you didn't hire us, black people that we're not going to shop at your stores. That was Operation Bread Blackness, and the churches were pushing it. The churches were our political headquarters. You know, they were where we strategize. These mega churches today, what are they doing? You can't just look at the fact that today we spend $1.3 trillion. It's a pittance. I know that sounds crazy when I say 1.3. When it's spread out, see, one of the problems that happened with the civil rights movement, as I see it, if I want to talk about critique, was that we had prior to that, I mean, maybe because of segregation forced us, but when we had our black communities like Black Wall Street or Okasee, Florida, or all these black communities that, you know, in Richmond, we had our downtown areas, but we had aggregates, we concentrate, okay? So our wealth stayed within that community. All healthy communities, the money that is spent there by the group circulates within that community, in your barbershops, and your cleaners, your grocery stores, your movie theaters, your hotels, your taxi stands. All these things were found even here in San Antonio. We had black-owned businesses, okay? This is a capitalist system, and capitalism, you measure wealth by ownership. Income, whether it's $50,000 or $100,000 income, that means you're working for somebody else, and that person is always going to be your boss. Of the 2.6 million entrepreneurs, according to the 2020 census, 1.6 million are one-man shops in the black community. There's 2.6 million black-owned businesses. 1.6 million are just one-man shops, barely making over $100,000. You can't compete in a capitalist system like that. That's what, we did a series of talks about powernomics in the last couple of shows. This is what Dr. Claude Anderson has been talking about for nearly 30 years. You can't talk about either segregation or integration without aggregates. Understand economics. He talks about that we got to look at our communities, and this is a thing that still has not been established. Again, the civil rights movement was an economic movement. Where are we economically? Even if we are spending $1.3 trillion, we are spending. You cannot consume yourself into power. There was a disease that was called consumption 100, 200 years ago. Okay, we call it tuberculosis today, but it was called consumption. Okay, it didn't make you powerful when you had consumption. That means your body was eating you alive. That's what to consume means. In a capitalist system that America is, you cannot have power politically, in the criminal justice system, anytime without economic power. And because $1.3 trillion what we spend, and it's diluted out. So that 1.3 makes, and every other group is benefiting from that money. Is when you concentrate and look at yourself as a nation. Every community, whether it's a Latina community or a Chinese community or it's a Italian community, they look at their communities as a nation. You don't set out your wealth without getting something in return. You don't let other nations come in there and take out. That's what apartheid was. That's what slavery was. That's what colonialism was. You got other groups coming into your community and digging out your wealth and then setting it out. And yet you are diluted throughout all these communities. Now, yeah, you could go into a library, you go to a white college. Yeah, we got that from. We got names on statues. We got names on streets. We got names on buildings. But did we have the economic power? When we were free, supposedly, in 1865 by the 13th Amendment, according to Dr. Claude Anderson, he was saying it was a shell game. 98% of the wealth went to the white communities. When you had 246 years of free labor, where do you think all that money went? The slaves weren't being paid. It was those groups that benefited from our work. Even the building of that Capitol building was done by black labor, but we were not compensated. All that money was sent to white banks, white communities. Even when after the enslavement, we pooled our wealth, which we, like anybody else, we did. It was ripped off by the white banking systems, under these departments that was established to help the so-called ex-slaves. We put our money into those white-facing banks, and they took it from us. We put our money into public education, and then we were segregated and not getting the true services for what we have. And the same thing happened after Brown versus the Board of Education. We talk about that. That's the narrative. Ooh, look, everybody, we got rid of, desegregated schools. But then in 1955, I think it was the next year, at Board of Education 2, where the Supreme Court said, by all deliberate speed, and then the white-facing educational system closed down black schools in places like Florida, in the South, and they started these academies for whites only. So why is it that every time we gain something with these civil rights laws, we would just accept that and not make sure that it was carried out? Using our votes, for one thing. People say, well, why we vote? Well, this is the system we got. I think it was Winston Churchill saying that democracy is one of the terrible system. But compared to all the other systems out there, it is the best thing we have going. And if you vote in a diluted way, or when you have other people call you, instead of concentrating on who we were and why we did it, the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment was specifically for black people. The 15th Amendment was specifically for black people. The 14th Amendment was used for corporations so that they became like human beings in the latter part of the 1800s. White women benefited more from affirmative action than any other group because of the wording of the Civil Rights Act. Okay, when they talked about gender, that was added on in the last minute. And mostly, so other people benefited from those laws, and we just let them do that. We let them call us minority. How do you differentiate yourself from other groups who come in that are minorities? We get diluted. Instead of aggregating and concentrating, which we used to do prior to the civil rights movement. That's the questions that those are the critiques. I got more, but I'm running out of time. I can't even go down the list of things that I still have to critique about what we're dealing with in America today. 58 years later, we're still dealing with the criminal justice system. We're still dealing with the voting. We're still dealing with the same things our ancestors did. Not knocking those icons. They did what they could. But it's when are we going to wake up to that truth and combine our wealth? All other groups do that. But I got to go. So until next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye. To the honors of our ancestors. Peace.